everyone, this is Big Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a review of the Mandalorian Season 3 finale, titled Chapter 24, The Return. Now there will be spoilers not only for this episode, but also potentially for other series within the Disney Star Wars franchise, such as Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Book of Boba Fett, so just beware when going into this overall video. Now going into this episode, we saw all of the Mandalorians mount an attack on the Great Forge to try and reclaim Mandalore from the rule of Moff Gideon. We saw their forces being ambushed, leaving Paz Vizsla killed and Din Djarin captured. So going into this finale, we've seen quite a disappointing season of the show so far in my opinion, but would this episode go some way to redeeming this year, just like Din Djarin himself? Well, in terms of an individual episode, it definitely provided plenty of action and spectacle. We had some well-staged fight scenes and the production and effects were all on par for a standout installment. Yet the end result overall felt underwhelming, much like the season itself. Everything was wrapped up very nicely and neatly, and probably the most disappointing aspect was that the series just reverted back to the status quo as what we saw from season 1. There was no sign at the end of any progression or development or any hint of what's to come in the future. There was no massive cliffhanger, end credits or character cameos to really get you hyped up for the next season. So I do suspect that many fans will likely feel just indifferent from this episode, and it definitely wouldn't have addressed any previous criticisms of the season. Now in terms of the story, it was essentially an all-out battle as the Mandalorians looked to reclaim their land, and yes, in many ways this is what it should have been. As stated before, we do get some very well executed sequences, with Din Djarin evading capture and fighting his way through all of the soldiers and shields with the help of R5, disabling all the barriers. We did see probably the most relatively moment when Din Djarin comes across the many clones of Moff Gideon who wanted to build an army in his own image. Now this scene of course references the cloning initiative, which will eventually lead to the Disney Star Wars trilogy and the Rise of Skywalker, where we see the cloning of both Snoke and Emperor Palpatine. Now I do have to say that sadly Moff Gideon himself just comes across as very stiff and cartoonish in this episode, and this was really a result of the fact that he's barely been in this season, which is a massive underutilization of a truly great actor in Giancarlo Esposito, who could have been a great villain for this overall series if they had used him right. We see him walking around in his own dark armour, which comes across as very stiff and clunky, just like the character himself. And again, this is just a major disappointment throughout this season. Now we did get another reveal when the Mandalorians find the underground caves that have plant life and vegetation, indicating that they can make the world an inhabitable place once again if they manage to reclaim it. Now we did get some great visuals as the whole swarm of Mandalorians fly towards the base. This was fantastic, again really ramping up all of the spectacle, and we had all of those epic cinematic thrills, and this is something that we really should have got more of throughout the entire season. We then had another great sequence where we see the Imperial cruiser on fire flying through the atmosphere, getting ready to crash into the base. So this is all very spectacular stuff. And we did have some good action fight scenes, as I mentioned before, with Din Djarin fighting off Gideon, and then later on we see Bo-Katan joining the fight. We had that moment where we see Gideon snapping the dark saber in half. And to be honest, the whole concept of the importance of the dark saber, they've never really got a grasp on it, and it just feels at this stage like a redundant weapon. Now the only real issues that I really had was the fact that in terms of Grogu, he was probably overall too competent in all of the battle scenes. You mean to tell me that 3 highly skilled Praetorian Guard soldiers couldn't handle one small little foundling as he was jumping all over the rails? They were struggling to target him and bring him down. Now I understand that they want to keep Grogu involved in all of the action, but considering that he's still very much been in training this entire season, not really having attained any high level of fighting skills, it was very baffling to see these soldiers struggling to take him down. And again, we had the same problem when we saw Grogu coming in at the end to help out Din Djarin and Bo-Katan take down Gideon. And the overall victory against Gideon and his forces came off as a little bit too easy. You never really felt that it was a truly epic struggle that it should have been. Now this is probably more a fault of the entire season and how it struggled to really build up the escalation and all of the tension and suspense from trying to reclaim Mandalore. I will talk about the lack of build-up in a Season 3 review of the show coming up very shortly, but in terms of this episode, when the victory does happen, it just doesn't have that spectacular or euphoric feel that it truly should do. Now yes, the moment when Grogu shielded Din Djarin and Bo-Katan from the explosions was visually great, but was all too fleeting and again just didn't really feel like the momentous occasion that it should have done. So when we come to the overall end of the episode, everything gets wrapped up nicely, as I mentioned before. We see Bo-Katan being confirmed as the new leader of Mandalore as the land is reclaimed. We have Din Djarin formally announcing himself as the adoptive parent of Grogu, which really didn't mean much as he's had that role really throughout the entire series. We see that Grogu is now a Mandalore apprentice and he is announced as Jin Grogu. So this is now the mandatory name change of the character that we've seen. Of course, he was Baby Yoda in Season 1 and then Grogu in Season 2. So it does make you wonder what they will call him at the end of Season 4. Now you would think that after the victory was won and the land reclaimed, that Grogu would be far safer based around the Mandalore clan. But for some reason, Din Djarin has to take him off to further adventures, and we see him contacting the Rangers of the New Republic, offering to be a freelance bounty hunter. So this again raises the whole concept of where exactly is the Mandalorian going as a show. For what reason does Din Djarin have to continue as a bounty hunter? As mentioned before, he could have just stayed with Mandalore and helped out as they rebuild their land. And we see later on that he also has a base within Navarro. So why doesn't he base himself within one of these two communities? And again, why doesn't he leave Grogu amidst the safety within these cities? And this is again the problem with the series as a whole, as it just seems like it wants to prefer to just stay to the status quo of just having Din Djarin and Baby Yoda travelling on all of these standalone adventures. Now again, if this is Season 1, this is fine, but when you are going to Season 3 or Season 4, you really want to have far more substantial and compelling story arcs. And much like the season itself, this finale just didn't really carry the weight and that real sense of momentum and change as what really a season finale should have. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings on the Season 3 finale of The Mandalorian. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As mentioned before, I will shortly provide a Season 3 review of the show where I will go into far more depth as to where exactly it can go ahead for Season 4 and maybe beyond that, and also what the ramifications could be going forward for this Disney Star Wars franchise as a whole as we come across upcoming shows such as Ahsoka and also The Acolyte. So look out for all of that content in the future, and if you have any other suggestions or movies or television series or any other topics that you'd like to see me cover within this channel, then also let me know in the comments and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves and I will see you very, very soon.